who owe these people money. You cannot owe someone money without knowing how much you owe. So I want to put it that debt accountability is important. Two, we must work on linking projects to loans. We cannot borrow loans for general budgetary support. Actually, where we lost it, Mr. Speaker, and Madam Speaker and honorable members, is from 2014, we shifted our borrowing strategy from specific donor-funded projects to general support. What that means is that you do your maths, you calculate you do your estimate, and then you get your revenue, and whatever is remaining, you put to debt. So debt comes to this country, like the Eurobond, without going to specific projects. How then would you pay that loan if it does not fund value-adding projects or proper investment in public assets? So that is something that we must do going forward. I'm talking about now going forward, because what has happened. We'll have to deal with it, but going forward, that is what we must do. A lot has been said about revenue mobilization, and the focus has been that we should be changing tax rates, we should be increasing tax rates, we should be coming up with new taxes. I don't think that is the solution. The solution to tax mobilization or revenue mobilization should be targeting the tax collector, KRA. KRA is like a cow which we milk without feeding. We have a provision that 2% of our revenue should go towards building capacity of KRA. But we don't do it. Look at the system that KRA is using at the moment. It needs re-engineering. If you hear or you listen to those who are involved in collecting taxes, especially custom duties. Custom duties, we are losing a lot through smuggling, through counterfeit products, because we don't have a system. We don't have a system that is foolproof, a system that can help us manage some of these tax leakages. Remember, there was a time, and I'm sure many of us, almost all of us here are old enough, you'll remember, that there was a time when KRA had a very good policy of graduate recruitment into KRA, and they were properly trained, like even for 2 years. You must have properly trained tax experts. The way we are recruiting staff at KRA at the moment and deploying them needs to be relooked into. You cannot have people who are not properly trained to collect taxes from people who hire properly trained accountants to calculate their taxes. I also want to say that you need to look at the leadership and management of KRA in general. So one of my first tasks will be to make sure that I have a sitting with KRA to look at how we can reform that institution. Because there was a time in this country, not long ago, when we were collecting 18% of our GDP as taxes. Today it is 14%. If we could just increase from 14% to 18% of GDP, you will be adding about 600 billion to our revenue base. So you'll be reducing the fiscal deficit and the fiscal gaps that we have. But finally, you talked about the finance bill that has been lost. I want to tell Kenyans, please don't panic. Let us stop making Kenyans panic. Mr. Speaker, you have been here with me. In the 10th Parliament, and even some, I think after 11th Parliament, finance bill used to be passed in September. We used to have 3 months into the financial year to pass finance bill. The minister then was allowed by law through revenue collection order to allow for some taxes, interim taxes to be collected. But the bottom line is the law could be in place in September, on September 30th. So there is no cause of alarm. We have a legal framework which is still obtaining. Yes, the Finance Act of 2023 has been declared unconstitutional, although I don't know whether I'm correct. That has been appealed. If that is correct, that is good. But still, we don't have a lacuna. In fact, finance bill is an omnibus amendment bill. We have about 5 or 6 legislations that finance bill usually amends. We have excess duty, we have excess duty, we have import duty, we have value-added tax, We have income tax, we have tax procedures act, and then we have fees and levies. These are specific legislations, Mr. Speaker. This House, if I'm approved, this House should help me bring these legislations directly touching on these specific statutes. We don't have to have a finance bill, but I'll seek the guidance and advice from the Attorney General. But I believe the good provisions which have been lost by this bill, which are not contentious, and there are many, which can still help this country grow the economy. We can bring them as specific amendments. It is provided in the contracts. And so those issues around Aurora and Kimwarera and such like equivalent projects, Honorable Mbui, have confidence, will not happen during my tenure. Finally, on Honorable Mbui, how would we navigate the lack of funds? We know there's lack of sufficient exchequer in this country, and that's why we have to divest and move to other areas which are off balance sheet, as I've mentioned before. But more importantly, our project management system. We have 437, Mr. Speaker, that is the latest data that I have, of stalled projects. This is where we have invested money, but they have become white elephants. We must value these stalled projects and see those ones which we can pick up, take them up, and complete them. Those which you can treat as sunk cost, and discontinue them. But, Mr. Speaker, there should be coordination between national and county governments. You find a huge government project, national government project, which was developed even from 10 years ago, in a county, lying there, yet a county government is constructing another state-of-the-art a block of offices. Why can't we have a system where national government can surrender to county government some of these bills so that they can complete and use them? On Honorable Mule, Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to move fast. I hope I'm doing justice to all the questions. Honorable Mule, I know there could be underfunding. There is underfunding of the health sector. But I think health sector, we must look at it in totality. Before we even calculate how much we spend, we must find out how much national government is spending and how much county governments in total, 47 of them, because we have one country with 48 governments, which should be interdependent. So when calculating how much we spend on health, we should take it in totality and make sure that any money that is supposed to be devolved for health is devolved for health. We should not keep money at the national level here, implementing things on projects which should have actually been implemented by the counties, and have a coordination on how this is done. It may not be my exclusive, it may not be exclusive duty of this office that I'm supposed to get to. We have the Senate to oversight this. We have county assemblies, and we have and we have control of budget. We must work collectively. So that would address the issue of ring fencing the money. We must allocate more resources to that department. Finally, Mr. Speaker, all this would only bear fruits if all agencies work together, including the EACC and other DCI and other agencies which help us in fighting wastage of public resources.
Good. Russell. Honorable Dida Russell.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable John Buddy, I think my entry is about the Treasury. Reform in Treasury is really important. As it were, Treasury is being manned by, I think, 2 or 3 tribes. Kenya has 42 different communities. All of them should be represented where the national cake is being shared. Having said that, my question is on financial inequalities in this country, where most of the rural constituencies, communities, or areas are actually totally marginalized, and they are not part of the mainstream economy. The question is, if the House will give you the job, what are some of the initiatives you are likely to undertake so that places like Suba, Moyale, Mandera, Lamu, are part of the mainstream economy of this country. Finally, is on what we call funds. People are keeping money in their homes because you are told, don't bank more than 1 million shillings a day. These are prescriptions, we are told, from the World Bank, the IMF, and the money is not in circulation in Kenya. And even in counties, where we are told people actually steal a lot of money there than in the national government, people are not banking money. What are some of the initiatives you are likely to undertake to make sure that actually Kenyans are confident that they'll be taking money to the banks, and it is more safer in the banks than when they are in their homes? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Abdi Sharia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mheshimiwa John Badi. And for me, there's a team called the pensioners. You can imagine they've been working for maybe over 40 years, doing a lot of good work, contributing to nation building. But unfortunately, when they retire, and expecting now the nation to repay them back and so that they can enjoy their retirement in peace, they end up following their pension payments, sometimes for years. What are your plans to ensure long-term sustainability of pension schemes and the timely payment of pensions to the beneficiaries, considering the growing physical pressures? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Ms. Shimbogo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I have two questions, but they're very simple. My question number one to the nominee, Honorable Mbandi. You have seen recently that there have been public unrest due to economic hardship. What specific policy will you implement to stabilize the economy and restore public confidence in the Treasury? Kenyans are saying that you have been given that docket knowing that there's no money in the national coffers. And one of the reasons they're saying that it is the appetite in terms of borrowing. Why do we borrow beyond the ceiling, which has been put using our regulation or other policies? Why do we borrow for projects which cannot finance itself? For instance, there's this project of SGR, where we took a big loan from the Exim Bank in China, and up to date, it has been a challenge for us to finance that loan. Why do we sometimes just borrow using foreign currency, and when our shilling goes down, it becomes a big challenge to us? Why can't we just know that, are we taking non-concessional loans or are we taking concessional loans? And why are we taking conditional loans which are not favorable to our country? My second question, it is on economic inequalities, which remains very high in this country, with significant disparity between urban and rural areas. And that is why we had the narrative of hustlers versus royal, or rather versus bourgeoisie. To me, inclusive growth strategies are needed to ensure that marginalized groups benefit from economic advancement. How will you ensure that economic growth will benefit all segments of society, including marginalized community, especially the youth, the women, and persons with disability? I thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Can we take Mukami as well?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is that there are many unclaimed financial assets that have not been claimed by rightful owners. What strategies will you employ to raise public awareness of the existence of these agencies to the public? The other thing, I really wanted to support you regarding KRA. There were very good system in KRA when they were recruiting the university graduates. And the government had invested a lot of money. In fact, they used to have even an intelligence department. And even those graduates were taken for training. Later on, I don't know what happened because all those graduates were fired. So what I would like to ask you, if you happen to get this chance, are you going to instate those people? Because they are trained, they know what they are supposed to do, instead recruiting other.
You can answer those, John?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. I'll start with the questions from Honorable Raso. On reforming Treasury, I think I talked about it, and I am committed to reforms at the Treasury. About 2 or 3 tribes manning the Treasury. Well, as a matter of fact, there has been discussion around this, and we are Kenyans. And if there are people who get positions just by virtue of being from specific communities, that should not be the case, and that should end.
But the context within which the question was asked was that then it also skews sharing of revenue. But sharing of revenue is not done at the Treasury. It's done in Parliament, isn't it?
That's correct, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, so, but...
where everybody is represented.
Yeah, but I think also on the issue of inclusivity, we need to be inclusive in all government ministries. Let's not just look at Treasury as alone.
Yes.
And by the way, Mr. Speaker, there was a talk that I'm most likely going to be the first cabinet secretary from my community. So that in itself, both, Mr. Speaker. I can't remember any other Luo who has ever been in that ministry. The only closest we came to is twice, when Tom Mboya was the Minister for Economic Planning, and when Anyang' Nyong'o was also Minister for Economic Planning.
And Adua
yeah, and Adua thrice. But National Treasury, no. But then that shows there's inclusivity, in my view. But yes, all ministries, there must be inclusivity. And in budgeting, Parliament does budgeting, and we are all represented in National Assembly. So there shouldn't be that discrimination. On financial inequality, I cannot agree with Honorable Raso more. We must find a system, and I'm going to ensure that is done, of equitable development of this country with the little resources that we have. Mr. Speaker, you've come to my constituency. Since independence, I will tell you, we have hardly. Now, in fact, the first time we saw a black surface in my constituency in terms of tarmac road was in 2017, when we had a small stretch, and then the work stopped. It's about 4 kilometers.
What would you say if you go to North Hor?
No, and I'm just giving you the example of my constituency.
Yes.
And I know it's worse even in other places.
Yes.
Where even having a Maram road that is usable is a challenge. So we must apply the resources of this country equitably. And that was the sense of devolution, but we must also make sure that the national government funds, which is still holding about 85%, is actually applied equitably. On the issue of keeping money at homes, we must strike a balance here, Honorable Raso. Yes, I know sometimes banks, because of the regulations and the policy that has been put in place by central bank, yes, that sometimes you go to the bank and your money, you know, sometimes I'm asked when my money comes from my SACCO, for example, Mr. Speaker, to my account, then I'm asked before I transfer it even to my wife. I'm told I must explain the source. And yet they could easily see this is from Parliament, this is from... So sometimes it can be discomforting. But we must balance that with international requirements, best practice. We are not operating in isolation, Mr. Speaker. Right now, through the Financial Action Plan Task Force, which is accepted internationally, and Kenya is a member of East and South African anti-money laundering group, where we have 22 countries. And actually in this August, Mr. Speaker, I am likely, if you approve my appointment, to chair a council meeting of ministers on this matter. We have set rules that we have agreed on, that we have signed to, so that we are accepted. Our financial system is accepted globally. If we fail to comply to some of what we have signed for, Honorable Russell, we stand at the risk of being blacklisted from the international market, and that has attendant consequences, which we would not want to get.
Nominee, you know, the issue
Yes.
on Russell's question is actually not banks making it difficult for people to deposit money over $1 million. I think it has been revised to 2. It's still 1 million.
I think it's still 1 million.
The issue is that the banks have completely misunderstood the concept and the philosophy. Because what the concept was is that if it is suspicious, you don't stop anybody from banking the money. But if it's suspicious, then you make a report to the Financial Reporting Center or any other authority. So people should not be prevented from banking money simply because it's over $1 million. But the moment the bank manager finds or feels that this money may be from a suspicious source, receive the money, hold it in abeyance, then report. Because it's very risky for people to keep money in their homes.
It's true.
And that again comes to what I think Kimani Ichung'wah or somebody else said, communication. Communicate to the public. If a trader in Kikomba, now they do cashless, but many traders in many places receive cash. 5 million, 10 million. But they are afraid of going to the bank because there's a list of about 20 questions. Yes. Yes, and this is a cash economy.
Yeah, and actually,
you must simplify this.
Thank you, I get you. Mr. Speaker, and actually it distorts our financial system completely. I agree. But Mr. Speaker, maybe allow me just to say 2 things in response to that. One is that I agree that this has been interpreted differently by banks, and we know why. I personally know why. It is because there was a period, remember the NYS scandals and those scandals, many banks were forced to pay fines. So banks became too cautious. So I think what we may need to do, or what I would do once in office, if you approve my nomination, is to have a meeting with the Kenya Bankers Association and also with the central bank, so that this matter is clarified, so that it doesn't become a bottleneck for Kenyans to bank, because the most ideal is for Kenyans to have money in their bank accounts. On the issue of pensioners, I want to also, again, which has been raised by Honorable Shuria, pensioners not being paid. Apart from the time lag between the time you retire to the time you start getting your pension, and I think we need to treat our senior citizens better. You know, you have offered a service to the public. Now that you are supposed to enjoy some of the benefits of the money that was saved, or you saved, or was saved on your behalf, you need to. Mr. Speaker, in the year ending 30th June 2024, we failed as a country to pay pension to the tune of 26 billion shillings. These are Kenyans who have retired and did not get their pension. This is a matter that I want to agree, and it is something that I'd already picked up, that we will make sure that we pay pensioners as and when immediately they retire. And this
you
can only
must,
be done.
If you get there,
Yes.
John Buddy, even as an MP, which you still are,
Yes.
I'm sure you know that when you go to your constituent's office or your home, about 10–20% of elderly people who visit you are carrying papers of unpaid pensions for 10 years, even more.
I have many of the messages here, Mr. Speaker, in my phone. So you are saying exactly what is correct.
Yes.
But Mr. Speaker, I am happy that we changed the system of contributing to the pension in this case, because again, the issue of sustainability comes about. The pension system that we have been running as a country was not sustainable, but with the superannuation scheme, we are likely now to keep abreast to the pension. But in the meantime, we must settle all the pensions that those pensioners who are eligible for receiving pension. And Mr. Speaker, I want to go to the questions raised by Honorable Mboko, Mishi Mboko, the MP for Likoni. There has been economic unrest, let me call it unrest, largely attributable to economic conditions, and unemployment being key. Mr. Speaker, every government has a vision. We had the vision in 1965, the sessional paper. I remember when Kibaki came in, there was economic recovery strategy for growth and employment. That was 2003. Then we came to Vision 2030 in 2008, which has been broken down into 5-year medium-term plans. We are in the last medium-term plan. All these, if you look at them, especially now Vision 2030, which is operating at the moment or obtaining at the moment, it was anchored on 3 pillars. The economic pillar, at least 10% growth, which we have not realized. There is a social pillar on equity, or inequality, or inclusivity. And then there is also the political pillar based on democracy and accountability to the people. If we follow this vision and model our philosophy to actualize that, then we will address the problem of unemployment, which is the single most important challenge that we have as a country today. In 2019, our population census was at 47 million plus. Out of that, Mr. Speaker, 35 million was people or Kenyans below 35 years, 75%. And this is a generation we have educated through free primary education and subsidized secondary education from 2003. Very ready for the market, no employment. That is why I was saying we need to shift our attention from using agriculture, which is the main driver of our economy, as an end in itself, to providing raw material for manufacturing so that we can create more job opportunities. With that, then we will be able to address this economic unrest, if I may borrow your word, Honorable Ms. Shimboko. And again, on economic inequalities, we need to, I am already thinking that World Bank is funding, although it is a loan, but very concessional loans, the social safety nets. We need not to put too much pressure on our expenditure. To free that money for other development activities, we get the World Bank to fund some of these safety net measures to remove inequalities that we have, even as we invest more money to the rural areas. Remember, both parties, let me repeat it again, the Kenya Kwanza has this belief on value addition, but also ODM and Azimio had a belief in investing in rural economy through making sure that we have even markets in rural areas, that we open up rural areas for development. If you do that, you will minimize and reduce inequality and create more jobs. Honorable Mukami asked about unclaimed assets. I must admit that personally, I have not engaged a lot with this Unclaimed Assets Authority, but if there are reforms that are needed to ensure that it lives to its mandate, statutory mandate, I will make sure that that is done, that the reforms are carried out, and capacity is built into that authority, so that Kenyans who are still there and can get what is left behind by their loved ones, get them their dues. They should trace those who should benefit from some of these unclaimed assets. But the amount
I think what you should, if you get there, that is, improve is how to manage those unclaimed assets. Yeah. Take, for example, a person dies intestate, unmarried, but has relatives. You had a bank account to which you are the sole operator. You've left money there. The Unclaimed Assets Authority should get the banks to give them the details, which must be available, so that they publish for the next of kin of such fellows to come forward. But what they do is they just treat it as unclaimed assets and proceed to take the money. And that is not right. There is nobody in this country who has no relatives. Not in Africa.
And Mr. Speaker, since this is a state enterprise or state corporation under my ministry, I will make sure that that is done. Actually, recently, I saw what one bank did. I will not give more details, but one bank reached out to beneficiaries of someone who died about 8 years ago, and they were still holding the money, and the beneficiaries came forth and got their money back. So that is what we should do with this authority. Finally, Mr. Speaker.
On Mukami?
Yeah, on Mukami.
Yes.
No, the other one, she actually agreed with me on the recruitment of staff.
So
Yeah, the other one is about the graduates who were trained.
Yes.
And they were fired. And,
KRA.
yeah, in KRA.
Yeah.
And regarding the system, because now you know what is happening. You can imagine the KRA officers are going loud, correcting taxes from hairdressers, mama mboga, and yet there were systems. So that is why I was asking whether you reinstate those people, because the government had taken them for training.
Yeah, I actually said that there was a system in place of training graduates, and I think it was a very good system. Honorable Mukami agreed. Yes. As to reinstating those who probably should have remained on the payroll, that I cannot give a promise until I understand. Yes. You know, there are human HR issues and the legal issues. Unless I get to understand the technical issues, I may be talking about something that may not be tenable.
Miss
Chairman, I'm sorry, but part of my question was not answered. Chairman, I had asked in the issue of the ceiling on borrowing, and also I quoted one example of a borrowing which we did on the SGR project, where we borrowed a lot of money from Exim Bank from China. I have raised this issue because I don't want to see you repeating the same mistake which was done during the last regime, and that is why we are having a lot of challenges now financing that loan to China Exim Bank. You didn't say anything about that.
Although he had already said many things about commercial borrowing and concessional borrowing.
Maybe just to summarize it by saying that public project investment management is a challenge. And I said I will make sure that we are investing on viable projects, whether it is from local funds or borrowed funds. And I also mentioned, Mr. Speaker, if you can recall, that we will be linking loans to specific projects, yes, and making sure that the expenditure is, public procurement is followed and done prudently, efficiently, and economy for money of the shilling is realized.
Let's take the last one from Amisi.
That was it.
Caleb?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One question.
Yeah, for being last, give me two, kindly. Thank you, Speaker. You know, also, I get the opportunity to listen to the entire interview when you are last, and you seem to be a person ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. But, you know, the former president of US, I think it's Harry Truman, once said that he actually had a plate like this one at his desk and written there, the buck stops here. So you might consider having such a plate on your desk and you write there, the buck stops here. Because, Mr. Speaker, the reason why you are in this job is actually from the reject the finance bill. So we are going to be at the center of budgeting and the financing for that budget. One of the ways of raising, we've said the revenue from the loans, borrow either domestically, externally, or grants. There is the aspect of domestic borrowing from the diaspora. I've studied 3 countries, Tajikistan, Nicaragua, and the Philippines, and even India. They have one of the highest diaspora remittance. And in fact, for Philippines, almost 35% of their GDP is from diaspora remittance.
26%.
26.
Yes.
Some countries are as high as 30. I've studied them. In fact, I'll give you a report. You also study. And if you can also zero down to diaspora and make something like a diaspora bond or diaspora infrastructure bond, where the government borrows from it, and the diaspora, because you see Kenyans demonstrating in London, because they have an interest in this country, wherever they are. So they fail to remit that money and invest here, and invest elsewhere. So we can tap into the global flow of income, basically, because we don't have the oil, we don't have the natural gases. So how do we maximize? That's something that I want you to really explain to me. And the last one, Speaker, at the aftermath of the World War, 700 delegates met in Mount Washington in Britain, New Hampshire. And they developed an international system. And that's where now the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development came in. The IMF came in. The purpose was for reconstruction for the World Bank. On this other hand, the IMF, the purpose was to stabilize currencies of various countries, stabilization, and to balance of payment. But this system has saturated our domestic policies. They have saturated our physical and the monetary policies. So much so that a minister sitting at Treasury has World Bank in his head. He knows that in absence of this, I rush to World Bank. It's no longer a port of last call. It's now a port of first call. How do we dislink our development path from the continuous dependence on the Bruton with institutions that were there to reconstruct Europe and Japan after the World War II?
Nominee, answer those quickly. We are running out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Do I proceed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kaleba Mitsi, the MP for Saboti, has actually noticed that I'm going to, and very ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. You could not be more right. Mr. Speaker, I am sure that His Excellency the President did not appoint me just to continue with the business as usual at the Treasury, because then there would be no need to make changes. He would have just continued with the person who was there. So I have an assignment to do. I will discuss with His Excellency the President on how to help reform the Treasury and to do it properly, and together with the Cabinet. On domestic borrowing and diaspora, I had a lot on how we can borrow more funds, whether green bonds, blue bond, and floating diaspora bond. It's only that the time limitation, I could not mention all of them. But I want to agree with Honorable Kaleba Misi that that is an area that we can tap on. And even look at ways of reducing transaction costs for diaspora remittances, because that's one of the reasons that you hear them complain a lot about. On IMF, by the way, I want to be very clear on IMF. IMF will never invite themselves to a country. We do invite them and agree with them on a program. There was a period we were not under IMF, but because of challenges occasioned largely by COVID-19 and the drought in the region, and also the global disturbance of the supply chain and all that, we then went back to IMF in 2020, 2021. But I have looked at what are these conditionalities. You know, sometimes we may blame IMF for nothing. We have agreed with them on a program, Mr. Speaker, that for us to tap onto that loan, what we must do, in fact, is one key thing: revenue mobilization. So we just need to agree on how we can convince IMF for the period that we are going to be under their program, which I don't think should be long. We must move to a system where we divorce ourselves from IMF and start depending on ourselves as we were before. But that we can only do by allowing, by doing what can be done in the interest of the country. They want us to maintain a deficit of no more than 4.4%. That's what we have agreed on currently. But we are moving towards, and we must move towards a budget deficit in the region of 2.5 to 3%. I know government has talked about 3.1. We can sustain a budget financing gap of 3%. With that, you will not need IMF intervention. And Mr. Speaker, I said, I want to end with that if we increase, we take back, don't even go to the ambitious 25% that we have set to ourselves of tax revenue to GDP. If we can take it back to 18%, we will be adding to this, to our exchequer, not less than 600 billion. And I think it is achievable. I believe it will be done.
Thank you, nominee. A quick run in a few issues thrown at us by the public. Some you have already spoken to. Are you aware that interest rates on loans are all-time high? What will you do to save Kenyans from exploitation by banks? Does Mbandi believe in single portal for tax revenue collection? How do you plan to position internal audit department to deal with zero-fault audit? Confirm or deny allegations of corruption at the University of Nairobi? I don't know whether when you are there or now, they're not saying. What are you going to do on unpaid refund from KRA for insurance agents? How will you expand tax base on how will you reduce tax evasion and increase compliance? Prioritize payment to UHC and JSS staff. Will you do that when you get in? How will you deal with late capitation to schools? Whether you will make public contracts like SGR with public with Kenyans, because Kenyans have been asking for that, just as you have said that you will make public debt public. Housing levy, will you tell Kenyans where this fund is domiciled? Is it in consolidated fund or is it in treasury bonds? Those are from the public. There is also, how will you promote the informal sector in Kenya? For instance, would you propose that all government offices procure locally manufactured furniture? Do you think that certain parts of the 2010 Constitution have contributed to a high public wage bill compared to GDP due to an excessively large administration? For instance, there are over 450 MPs, 1,500 MCAs, 47 county governments. If this is the case, what are your thoughts? Would you recommend that the president proposes a referendum to reduce the constitutional overload of the administration? Those are members of the public listening into this conversation. If you can deal quickly with those, I have only one question for you of my
Chairman, there is another one regarding money laundering. What are you going to do about it?
So if you can run through all those. Some you have already talked about. You can.
Yeah. Actually, even the question by Honorable Mukame, I think I talked about that.
You did.
We are even hosting a regional body. Kenya is trying to comply.
Yes.
By the way, I would have talked. Mr. Speaker, I'll just pick on a few. Interest rate, I think
Those
we talked about.
The public watching these proceedings, and I think that's very good.
Interest rate is high. It's now at 13.3%. It has moved up. But part of the reason why monetary policy, CBK came up with this monetary policy was to reduce inflation. You know, it was at a point when inflation was very high. Our inflation had reached 9.6, 9.7% in 2022 October. So it had to come down. We had to cool the economy.
Yes, Junet?
The Speaker, nominee. Interest rate is not at 13%. 13% is the CBK monetary policy rate. But the interest rates now banks are charging us 20%, 21%.
20 plus.
20 plus, not 13, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Junet, for helping. By the way, By the way, you know, when
You
accountants...
know, Junaid is a trader, so he
Yeah.
knows.
When accountants talk about interest rate, we only talk about the CBK rates, the interbank lending rates and all. So the rate, the base lending rate is at 13.3%. Let me make it clear. And that gives rise to even 20% charged by banks based on risk assessment. So this was done to cool the economy, but I think when I made my initial contributions, I said it has reached a point where we have to now balance between controlling inflation and making money available to the private sector. Mr. Speaker, you remember there was a time banks were chasing us all over the place to take money using pay slips. It's not there anymore. Why? Because government has become the single most important customer to banks. So it is between chicken and egg. Which one comes first? Do we cut on our expenditure? Do we reduce money that we borrow domestically first? Or do we reduce the rates first? So those are the issues that we need balance. So I'll have a meeting with the Central Bank and Kenya Bankers Association to address this matter. If I am confirmed. Yes. Mr. Speaker, on internal audits, I can't agree more. Again, we must use our internal audit to improve efficiency in financial management. And internal audit is resident at the Treasury. This issue of corruption at the UN, I saw it on some email that was sent to me. And the allegation was that I used...
To the same person?
I suspect. Yeah. That while working at the University of Nairobi, that I used the university funds to campaign. Probably the person who has sent that message is not alive to the fact that I left university and went elsewhere, worked for 3.5 years before I became a member of parliament.
You said so.
Yeah. So I left university in 2004. And actually, I resigned and got my pension back. It was 218,000. If I stole their money, they would have not paid me my pension. I think that's, to me, someone who probably is wondering how I made it to Parliament. And I didn't have, like, I didn't have money. Your
competitors, just go on.
Yeah, but I want to tell him that I was or her, that I was the least endowed in 2007. Actually, they used to make a joke that I was campaigning with a bicycle and made it to Parliament because of trust that the people had in me. Late capitation to schools, this is all about availability of revenue. We must make money available and pay capitation, pay pension, pay CDF. Remember, we have rolled over 13 billion from last year's NGCDF. I personally, Mr. Speaker, am a proponent of National Government Constituency Development Fund. I support it fully because this is money that has revolutionized education in rural areas. You go to my constituency, the constituency I've represented for 15 years. Before CDF, we didn't even have primary schools. They were there by name, but there were no classrooms. Right now, you can see what it has done, and many others. Contracting, making public the contracts, that I started by saying we must be transparent and communicate what we do as a country. Housing levy, I don't want to really talk a lot about this housing levy because I still need to understand how it is operationalized, where the money is resident, and all the challenges around it we must deal with because it is my duty if I'm confirmed. It is my duty to make sure that this money is properly accounted for. Promoting informal sector, I think I talked about that. Yes, in terms of wage bill, contributed by the Constitution, that is true. Mr. Speaker, this Constitution is too expensive. I know the counties had been given, but Mr. Speaker, truth be told, we should have had these counties as agents of devolution for development, but not government. We should have had bigger governments. Where you have now, you go to Vihiga, Mr. Speaker, it's a county with governor, deputy governor, you have CCs, 10 of them, you have county assembly, you go to Busia,
chief officers,
it's the same, chief officer, all that. You go to
sub-county administrators,
yeah, and
ward administrators, village administrators.
you name it.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there is even a clamor, very outrageous, for more counties. My super community want a county. I'm even asking, is it viable?
Mary wants a county.
Mary is calling for the Teso County. Let us face it. If we could have a system where we have regional governments, and then now devolve resources you can devolve as much as you want. Look, we have devolved CDF with a fund manager there with a very few skeleton staff, and it is working. We could do the same with the devolving resources. That is what Kenyans wanted. But these big governments with big cars, with flags all over the place, I think we overstretched ourselves. But that is upon Kenyans to decide. It is not John Badi, either as a cabinet secretary or even a member of parliament, to decide for Kenyans. Kenyans will make that decision.
Thank you, John. I'll ask you two questions. One, we were told by one of your colleague nominees that in the road sector alone, we have pending bills of 166 billion.
Yes.
Out of which 92 is actual debt or bills, and the rest is interest and penalties.
Yeah.
Now, in the event you get this position you are looking for, would you take time to negotiate with the people you owed the money to compromise on interest and penalties so that you reduce the weight on the exchequer? Number two, the PFM Act is very clear, and we passed it in this parliament, that no procuring agent can procure goods and services unless there's an attendant budget and funds. How are you going to ensure that this is enforced so that we don't run into these problems of pending bills? Because if you have an attendant budget, you procure goods and services, on delivery or completion, you pay. What are you going to do?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree that we will have to negotiate the interests and penalties that have been charged on various contracts. I am aware of that bill by the ministry. That is actually State Department for Roads. If you go to our records in Parliament, Public Accounts Committee had requested the Ministry of Roads to provide information on pending bills, analyzed, categorized in terms of principal sum, interest, and penalties. And we have that information in Parliament. I'm sure my colleagues will submit a report to the effect. We actually were recommending that the government negotiates with these contractors on the interest and penalties. But that you can only do if you show willingness and you show intention to pay. So I will work with the Cabinet Secretary for Roads and Infrastructure to make sure that we clearly demonstrate an intention to settle these bills. Road construction has stalled across the country as a result of this. And I will tell you, my constituency, where I come from, is one of them. As one project which has just stalled because of this. So we need to do this across the country so that the road constructions resumes. Because we have already invested money in these roads. We can't continue keeping them. But we have constraints. Look at the budget of roads, Minister. In fact, I was saying that that budget, at the rate of 50 billion, the pending bills alone, you may require not less than 3-4 years. But then if you have to finance all committed.
Churchill told us committed road projects.
That's actually where I was heading.
Are 1 trillion.
Yes. If you have to commit to, for all commitments, you need 20 years. Committed roads, that is roads that have been started, their value, if you sum all of them across the country. So it's terrible. There are some initiatives which I think we should promote, where we get some of this road infrastructure done through PPPs. But there is also an initiative to negotiate, if the terms would be favorable, with some of the contractors that are coming from specific countries to take up this if it is within our budget ceiling, loan ceiling, or debt ceiling to take them up. Like the Chinese government has so many contractors around here who are doing roads using GOK funds. Currently, there are very few road projects done by loans from China. They are all working on roads funded by GOK funds. So we need to explore that. Finally, on procurement without budget, Mr. Speaker, this is again another problem. And the problem is not entirely that there is no budget. The budget is not there, but there is no money. The exchequer releases come late. Why? Because we are not able to collect. We don't have money. So we must just cut our clothes according to our sizes. That is the starting point. The planning we must have, and someone asked about the planning in one single portal. There is a disconnect between planning and budgeting. We need to have to synchronize. And this is the same ministry. We must ensure that we link planning to budgeting, to cash management, so that we don't commit ourselves into purchasing or contracting when we don't have the capacity to pay.
We have grossly overshot the time. There are some people watching from US who have sent these two questions. What is your view on the potential of blockchain technology within the financial sector, particularly in light of the blockchain technology report to 2020? Would you support the adoption of this technology? The next one, in light of the increasing global uncertainties and economic volatility, gold reserves have become more crucial in safeguarding national wealth and ensuring economic stability. Elaborate on how you would propose leveraging gold reserves as a reliable store of value in the current and future economic landscape. Additionally, would you explain any strategic measures that can be considered to enhance the role of gold in Kenya's financial system? Take at maximum 2 minutes. These are Kenyans watching these proceedings from the US. Pardon?
The first one of the blockchain, Mr. Speaker, I must admit that I need to understand it better. And
that is an honest answer. We understand.
We need to get what it is. If it is something that
don't
can
also
help
know it.
the country,
I also don't know it.
The better. On leveraging on gold reserves.
We'll need somebody to teach us about it.
Do we have an ICT person around? But don't you worry, Mr. Speaker. Now that has been brought.
There's a nexus between finance and ICT.
We will.
CBK, maybe when you get, if you get approved, CBK should be able to sort you.
Yes. Okay.
That's why I was saying that don't you worry, I will get...
On the gold reserves, just say yes or no.
Yeah, gold reserves, that actually we need as a country to move towards even establishing sovereign wealth funds, and gold reserves can help us in that. Yes. And those are areas, those are emerging areas that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, John Buddy, as a nominee, I have some few mundane questions for you. Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any integrity-related report or investigations?
No.
Do you hold any leadership position in any political party within Kenya?
No, at the moment.
You said you resigned.
Yes.
Can you tell us your net worth?
My net worth, Mr. Speaker, is 380 million. And Mr. Speaker, my net worth, the difference between, I saw some of my colleagues have done their calculation differently, but my understanding of net worth is it's assets less liabilities.
Liability, yes.
So if you take all the assets that I have, and I wish I had my file here.
I've seen your calculation.
Yeah, it's 380.
You have 437.
Yeah, 437
less 57
assets.
million liabilities.
Yes.
You are 380.
Yeah, and the liabilities is mortgage within Parliamentary Service Commission.
SACCO loans.
SACCO loans, about 20 million, about. And finally, there is the KCB Bank loan of about 12 million. Yeah.
We received 43. We received 34.
The only deferred income, Honorable, the only deferred income I have is I have some I have two now, but the one for Parliament I don't know. the pension. I don't know how much it will be, so I didn't.
It will be calculated.
But there's one which I have with ICA of about 6 million.
Your pensionable now it will be calculated.
Yeah.
It will be just below 200.
Thank you.
Chair, I was mentioning that because of the challenges Kenyans have had with this matter, because like now his deferred income next year would constitute part of his net worth, or rather when it matures.
Yes.
And most likely, if he's approved or if he goes through another vetting, Kenyans will want to know
how did your wealth grow?
How did your wealth grow?
I will be able to explain that, Mr. Speaker.
So, nominee John Buddy, we received 34 memoranda against or about you, some saying it was right to be nominated, others not. And there are 3 particularly that just involve around, I think, parochial conflicts within your political setup, but you have answered all of them. So we will be, there's some things that clearly look parochial, how you quarreled with people in political meetings and so on. So we've also looked at your documents and cross-checked with what we have, and we found them correct. So unless you are lawfully held, you are released to go to your other duties.
Thank you.
Today is your Sabbato.
Yes.
So you can go to church.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I requested for my date to be changed, but the only time which was available was still Sabbato.
Yes.
Because it was 7 p.m. yesterday.
Yes.
And according to my faith, from 6 p.m. or thereabout, already Sabato imeingia. So, but I treated this as kama, is it donkey ama ng'ombe imeanguka kwa shimo?
Yes, lazima utoe.
Yeah, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, together with the members of Parliament, members of the committee, for giving me this opportunity to appear before you and present my case. I have done my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant, you can escort the nominee. Thank you. Pardon, we'll give you 5 minutes. And let me also say this. Of course, this was a candidate of immense interest, given the importance of the docket. There will be others with less immense interest. So we'll recover the time we have overshot with the next or the other. Yes.
hata kama atainua mkono lakini
Easy questions.
Sasa 1 2 1 2 unasikia? One two. Okay. Let me check the cable. So.
Unaweza enda huko nyuma. Unavuka.
Masi. Ama sikusikia kitu Masi?
No, Irene.
Okay, nimesikia vitu zangu tu. Irene.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Tunajicho
Actually, this guy, nominee was this guy. Nani anafuata? He follows actions. Yes, safe. I think it's very good. Very good. Panisha juu kidogo. Iko commercial.
Honorable members, we have quorum. Welcome back. Our next nominee is one Salim Mvuria Mugala. Sergeant, you may bring the nominee. Take your seat. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
You are Salim Mvuria Mugala, EGH.
Yes.
Welcome to this Committee on Appointments to interact with us so that you can be assessed by this Committee of National Assembly on your suitability to hold the office to which you have been nominated by His Excellency the President. We'll start by administering an oath. You may choose to use the Bible, the Quran. I think there's also an Indian holy book.
The Quran.
The Gita. Yes, the Quran, so you may be upstanding. Take the Quran in your right hand and recite the oath that the sergeant will show you.
I, Salim Mvuria Mgala Mvuria, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee on the matter under this consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me Allah.
The next is if you have your documents, pass them on to the clerk to cross-check with what we have on you. We'll start by introducing ourselves. I'm the chairman of this committee, Speaker of the National Assembly. On my right is the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Gladys Boss. On my left is the Clerk of the National Assembly, Samuel Njoroge. I'll invite the honorable members of the committee to introduce themselves. Naisula.
Naisula Lesuda, MP Samburu West.
Nelson Koech, MP Belgut.
David Kosing, MP Pokot South.
Gikaria David, Nakuru Town East.
Mase Mary, Teso South.
Abdul Rahim Daud, MP North Imenti.
George Gitonga Murugara, Tharaka.
Owen Baya, Kilifi North.
Robert Mbui, Kadiani.
Stephen Mule, Matungulu.
Dido Raso, Saku.
Abdi Shurie, Balambala.
Nishimboko Likoni.
Rehab Mukami.
I'm Caleb Sabot.
For the record,
Kimani Shongo.
for purpose of these proceedings, you'll be referred by everybody as nominee. So nominee, introduce yourselves by name, educational background, work experience, and your key competences that make you believe you are suitable for the appointment to which you have been proposed in under 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of this committee. My name is Salim Mvuria Mgala. I have a master's degree. I also have a bachelor's degree from Egerton University. I also did my KCSE at Mpeketoni Secondary School and primary school at Maveriverini Primary School.
Mpeketoni in Lamu?
Yes, Mpeketoni in Lamu. Mr. Speaker, I come to this vetting session also having served as the first governor of Kwale County, and I also worked different positions in international non-government organizations. I also come to this vetting committee as the immediate former Cabinet Secretary, Mining, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs. I come to this committee, Mr. Speaker, having served the public for over 10 years. Mr. Speaker and members of this committee, I also have leadership, management, and administrative skills that are part of my competencies for this process. I come to this vetting committee also with a formidable track record of performance in different spheres of the public, having transformed the county of Kwale socially, politically, and economically, and also having provided leadership in key reforms in the Ministry of Mining, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs. There are quite a number of details, but because of time, I want to present myself before this committee and before Kenyans as a candidate, as a nominee who has the formidable requisite experience to manage the affairs of the Ministry of Investment, Trade, and Industry. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll invite the Deputy Speaker to ask the first question.
Honorable Mvuria, I will ask you questions, one relating to where you're coming from, so we know how well you performed from your previous Ministry of Mining and Blue Economy, and then to the ministry that you're going to. First, I'll start. I would like you to tell us about the key deliverables that can be attributed to your tenure when you were the CS for Blue Economy, Maritime, and so on. You know, taking into account some of the issues that are raised, in 2023, there was unexplained deaths of cage farmers in Lake Victoria. You know, what did you do about that? There was also, when you came into office, there had been a report in 2019, the performance audit report on monitoring of mining operations by the State Department of Mining. And an act of parliament, the Mining Act, had been passed when you came into office. So Kenya said that, the report said that currently only 1% of our GDP is attributable to mining, yet it should be as high as 10%. And another thing that was raised in that report is that we've had mines that have not been restored, which has become areas of criminal activity. There's also been deaths around unlicensed and properly regulated mines. So how did you work when you joined office to enhance the sector's oversight, improve licensing conditions, and to ensure that we have responsible mining practices? On where you're going, I'm reliably informed that the Ministry of Trade, where you're going, also has Kenya Bureau of Standards under it. Tell us what you will do to ensure that you curb the issue of counterfeit products and substandard products and contraband products coming into our country, particularly ethanol, which has caused the big challenge of illicit brew, because people are smuggling the ethanol through Uganda and Tanzania, because I think the duty in Kenya is much higher. And lastly, also the banned pesticides that are banned and have been confirmed to cause cancer that are coming through our borders and are being cleared by KEBS. Thank you.
Nominee, you can answer those.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Gladys, for the questions that you put before me. First of all, when I reported and assumed office at the Ministry of Mining, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs, this was a very new ministry. The three topics have been there before: mining, fisheries, blue economy, but in terms of having it as a ministry, that was the first time. So I did provide leadership in carrying out key reforms to ensure that that ministry can achieve the mandate and also can make a contribution in the economy of our country. And the first reform that we carried out was the reform around licensing. Before the reforms, licensing was very haphazard, and therefore what has happened now is that we have now an organized licensing system where investors apply through the online cadastre, and then we have structures that review and recommend licensing. And even as I left office, the process of licensing is up to date, and it is now working according to procedure. As a result of that, the moratorium was lifted in October last year, and licenses over 1,200 are now getting processed without any challenges. The second thing that is key for reforms is the testing and sampling. Investors had a lot of challenges, you know, on testing their products, and therefore I led reforms that have now devolved 8 labs across the country. So now we have decentralization, and investors can easily now do their testing across the country. There's one more that is still under reform, the Madini House, which I also had committed to the committee at that time, and it is also in good progress. I also provided leadership in instituting reforms on value addition, and as we speak, we have quite a number of investors across the country that are doing value addition, because exporting of raw minerals denies the country a lot of revenue and jobs. If you go to the Western region, for example, we have an investor in gold refinery, 5.8 billion. In Elgeyo Marakwet, you have Flospa. We have an investor, 4.8 billion. In Vihiga, we have an investor, 2.5 billion. And we had also mapped other areas of the country. Right now, there's an investor who is ready to do 11 billion of iron ore in Taita Taveta. That will also benefit Tharaka in an area called Kithiori and part of Kitui. You know, so that bringing on board of investors is part of my achievement in the ministry. And we also organized the artisanal mining individuals into cooperative societies. Now we have about 300 cooperative societies that are ready for licensing across the country. I provided leadership in gazetting 29 artisanal mining committees that will be giving permits on the ground so that people do not have to travel away from where they are. We took the issue of illegal mining very seriously and safety, and proposed measures to have a mining police unit that is responsible for some of the issues. So I take note of the issues you have raised about the insecurity in some of the mines. So the mining police unit has been very critical in making sure that they work with the county security teams to ensure that some of these issues are being addressed on the ground. In terms of mine restoration, each of the applicant for a mining license, they have to attach an environmental restoration plan, which they do as they report, and they also do as they exit. And we have compliance teams to ensure that this can be observed. The other thing is that mining was understaffed, and we have quite a number of staff now who have come on the ground, and things are moving on. On blue economy, many people, many Kenyans had not understood the blue economy and fisheries sector. And we instituted reforms also to ensure that we can inspire the economy of the country through blue economy. As a result, we provided a mapping in the Indian Ocean and Lake Victoria so that we can allow for lower level value addition units and infrastructure that are going to help fishermen and other stakeholders in the sector. So as a result, we did mapping from all the way Lamu to Kwale, and also from Busia to Migori, and identified areas for basic value addition. As I speak, these value addition points have now been contracted, and they will be helping fishermen to delay sales so that they can fetch good price. On that note, we also provided leadership in ensuring that we reform the beach management units into cooperative societies. Right now, we have around 240 cooperative societies in the fishery sector that are going to be very useful, you know, to engage with the economy in terms of capacity building, but also in terms of engaging and being linked to financial institutions. So right now, the government is now ready to invest 1.4 billion in the coast region for the landing sites, and the government is also ready
to invest another 1.5 billion in the Lake region, all the way from Mulukoba to Got Kochola in Migori, where those structures have been identified. Since independence, this country has not had an industrial vessel. We licensed the first one, which is going to be providing, avenue for industrial fishing and provide 4 billion every year in terms of income in the Indian Ocean. Our target was to do 3 before the end of the year, but last 2 weeks we gave license to 1 vessel, and more are coming to ensure that we are able to inspire the potential in the blue economy sector. So, Mr. Speaker, this topic is very lucrative, but I also want to add that Kenya is now a highly respected maritime country, because when we went to London last year and the campaign, Kenya was elected category C as a maritime country. And as a result of that profile, I continue to provide leadership to ensure that we are able to upgrade our institutions to fit the new profile. As a result of that, we have a pending draft bill for Bandari Maritime Academy to be a full institution. And part of the upgrade is to construct a survival and training center, which will cost the government of Kenya 2.4 billion, basically to ensure that we enhance our capacity building on maritime affairs.
Okay, I think, Honorable Mvurya, I think I'm satisfied now, but I think it confirms what the President said, that you had very poor communication, because you've done great things, but no Kenyan knows about it. I am from the Flospa area. I didn't even know that you have an investor for it. So maybe you can use an opportunity to tell my people in Elgeyo Marakwet what exactly you're doing with Flospa before you go to your next answer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Gladys. And I think maybe we missed out, but the members of parliament from that region and the leadership, we were together when we were introducing the investor. But because of this session, I'm sure now we have created awareness across the board to tell everybody that now we have an investor in Elgeyo.
Before we go to the next, Salim, the licensed industrial vessel in our ocean waters, is it Kenyans or foreigners?
It is a foreign-owned, but also we will have Kenyans who also partner in that vessel.
What % local content?
The local content, okay, we haven't signed the agreement yet. I think that was part of the negotiation, but we are looking at between 15 to 30% Kenyan.
The law provides 40.
That was the initial negotiation, and the negotiations have not been closed, so I'm sure
anyway, now
my colleagues will take over and move.
We'll ask whoever will be taking over.
Exactly.
Majority Leader?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker.
Remember, strictly 1 question each.
Honorable Speaker, CS nominee, EAC, the East African Trade Community, trade negotiations. Kenya is viewed as a very weak negotiator, especially for her local protection of her local industries and local farmers. And I would want to hear what you intend to do, should you be confirmed in this ministry, to be a good negotiator for Kenyan industries and more so farmers. Yesterday, the Honorable Mule here, or the day before, was speaking about tomato farmers, onion farmers, potato farmers, egg farmers, poultry keepers in the country not being able to sell their produce locally because of the proliferation of cheaper products coming from the East African community countries. And largely because of the East African Treaty, we cannot use tariff barriers, but the non-tariff tariff barriers, which are supposed to be negotiated by the ministry. I'm told we've been very weak on that. What would you do to do that? And also on the policy of import substitution. We had very many good proposals, and I agree with the Deputy Speaker that you clearly failed in communication, because all the good things you've spoken about in your ministry of former Ministry of Mining, as you say, you engage with the Elgeyo Marakwet leadership. The Deputy Speaker was born there, but she represents the people of Singishu. Next door, she didn't know, because you engage with the local leadership. But that is an investment for Kenya, not for Elgeyo Marakwet County. And therefore, I want to put it to you, and you will tell us whether you actually did fail in communication. And if you failed in your previous ministry in communication, what would you say to convince Kenyans and us that you will not fail in communicating what you are doing for our country in the new ministry should you be approved? And I'm saying that, moving on to what I was speaking about, import substitution, our local manufacturing sector, because of a failure of communication in government, our local manufacturers had very good propositions or provisions in the finance bill that was lost, as we have been told, out of poor communication by government. We have now exposed our local manufacturers, whether they are manufacturers of diapers, sanitary towels, or those in the steel industry, to unfair competition from very cheap imports whose standards we can't even ascertain, since they come to the country done on standards from other countries, especially those from the far Asian countries. What will you do as a new minister to ensure that we at least save the good provisions that were there in the finance bill, touching on local manufacturing industry, to protect our manufacturing industry now, as since the State Department for Industry will be under you, and some of those provisions sought to protect that State Department work in the manufacturing sector.
Nominee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to address the matters that have been raised by the Honorable Majority Leader, and thank you very much, Majority Leader. I think I will, first of all, I want to begin on where you stopped. On the issue of communication, I must say that we did all the best to communicate this through the media and through any other forms. However, going forward, it is a matter that we will be able to strengthen to ensure that there is communication. And communication here...
you know, there is the mainstream media,
yes,
which we used to call mainstream media, which is the TV stations and the newspapers. But today, the alternative media, which is social media, is now the mainstream media.
Yes, exactly.
So you've got to change your thinking, who's alternative and who's the mainstream.
Yeah, that is one of the areas that we will, going forward, I think as government, we will be able to use those channels of communication to ensure that we get everybody on board. On the matter of local manufacturing and the industry in general, that Honorable Member alluded to the fact that there were good things in the finance bill, which were meant to revamp, you know, some of the local manufacturers. One of the key areas that we will strengthen, or I will provide leadership in strengthening, is to make sure that we bring as many stakeholders as possible. For example, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and many other stakeholders, to make sure that as much as possible they participate. And also using some of the
corporations and sagas in the ministry.
Chair, on a point of order, maybe the nominee did not get my question right, because those are the processes you are describing.
Yeah.
I was asking, should you get nominated?
Yes.
And you find, for instance, the provision to levy excise duty on sanitary pads that are fully finished products from, for instance, China, was in an endeavor to actualize the import substitution policy to support local manufacturers. That particular provision was lost in the finance bill. Should you be approved, will you pursue, and maybe the nominee who was there before you actually did put it very well, that it is possible to break down the finance bill into various other laws. Should you then be approved, would you pursue actualizing the good provisions that sought to protect local industry? Because, as I said, they were lost because of the poor communication generally in government. So my direct question is, are you going to pursue the import substitution policy and protection of local industry, should you be approved, and bring legislative proposals to Parliament to actualize that which was lost?
Oh, yes.
Nominee?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I think the answer is yes. Because, you see, if we had very good proposals that inspire the economy and they were lost, what I'm committing to this committee is that we will, and I will provide leadership in the ministry to pursue them. Because if we are to inspire the local manufacturing, then as government we need to have a deliberate policy to ensure that either we impose levies or we reduce levies to ensure that these manufacturing industries can survive. So the answer is yes. I will be providing leadership in pursuing these good things. But as we pursue these good things that were lost in the finance bill, Mr. Chairman, I also want to insist that we'll have a robust engagement with stakeholders who may not have seen this before, so that the decision that is finally made is made with all stakeholders in mind. So that is a commitment and a yes, and we will use all manner of communication to ensure that we are able to paint, the positive gains of these particular good things in the finance bill. So this is something we will pursue, Mr. Speaker. The second point about a weak negotiation for Kenya, I also want to commit that we will change the tables. It has come out not just in negotiating for farmers, but even in other forums, where we have a subcommittee of the East Africa community. Kenya has been making a huge contribution in terms of budgets, but in terms of benefits, you find that other countries are the ones benefiting. So this is an area I also want to commit that I will move in to ensure that we protect the national interest. And on this one, we make sure that we have parameters before negotiation, and we evaluate our negotiation so that we are able to benefit our people.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have one question for the nominee, and it's in relation to the docket that is going now. Even though I come from an area where his previous docket was important to them, but now that we have been told to ask only one question, let me go to the future. The past, the one who's coming is what I will ask, whom I will ask. So, Mr. Nominee, let's go to manufacturing. And you know very well that manufacturing industry employs many people, contributes a lot to the economy of this country, and that's where economies that have developed emphasize their efforts on long time ago. So the manufacturing sector in Kenya now is facing significant challenges, Mr. Nominee, with many industries shutting down actually, production plants or downsizing operation. This is because the key issues they are raising is high taxation, increased cost of power, ease and cost of doing business, and healthy competition from imported finished goods. And then neighboring countries are seemingly looking more attractive to them because of those issues. Some of those who have relocated business to these jurisdictions, if approved as a Minister for Trade and Industry, what are you going to do to reverse this sorry state of affairs, Mr. Nominee?
An additional question to that. It's almost a similar one. As a Cabinet Secretary nominee for the Ministry of Trade and Investment, how do you plan to protect local industries and provide adequate financing for micro, small, and medium enterprise in the manufacturing sector, especially considering the significant decline of foreign direct investment as a share of GDP from 3.1% in 2011 to 0.3% in 2022?
Salim, let's take the next person. If you have no question, we pass.
I may not have a question, but I have something to say. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Mvurya, many Kenyans think or say you are a desk minister. You only sit on your desk and run your ministry from your desk. Why am I, and one of the evidence they are giving is that where you are as Minister for Mining, many counties are mineral counties or mining counties. And for example, West Pokot County is seriously a mineral county. If you have somebody in West Pokot who is Mvurya, or is Honorable Mvurya, they will be thinking you are actually a governor of Kwale. Nobody will remember these 2 years that you have been a minister, Honorable Mvurya, in all honesty and truth, nobody. So now you are going to a ministry which is also very important, which is industries. And all counties are going, the bottom up, they are going to be maybe industrial centers. Are you going to run your ministry from the desk where you are in minerals? Thank you, Speaker.
Short questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Quickly.
I want to confirm that I'm not a desk minister. I'm not a desk minister. I was in West Pokot because of the clinkerization program, the 45 billion. I was in Kithiori with Mheshimiwa here, confirmed. And many other places across the country, including Kadhonzweni in Makueni, Mulukoba in Busia, and many others. So maybe I may not have come to your constituency. I was also in Kamket and Katikit.